Greetings, everyone. It is our pleasure to be able to participate in the Malta International Conference. The title of our quantitative research is The Teacher's Readiness in Conducting ESL Remote Teaching in Malaysia During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Let me introduce the authors for this research. The first author is I myself, Ling Suzanne. The second author, Fatin Najiha Zainuddin. The third author, Matsura Aimuni Muhammad Zin. And last but not least, the fourth author, Madam Melo MD Yunus. We are from the Faculty of Education, University Kebangsaan, Malaysia.
My name is Fatin Najiha binti Zainuddin. I am the second author for this research paper. So I will start with the introduction section first. So as we all know, the world has been facing the novel coronavirus, or also known as COVID-19 pandemic, for more than 2 years now. So formal in-class education was no longer a safe and practical option for both students and teachers due to this concern. A particular report published by UNICEF 2021 displayed an inconsistent trend in global schools closure from March 2020 to February 2021 as an outcome of this pandemic. So to tackle this pressing matter, the Ministry of Education, MOE, of Malaysia was compelled to devise an immediate yet efficient solution to ensure the education system remains functional during this global crisis. Hence, the concept of remote teaching in Malaysia, termed as PDPR, or in Malay, Pengajaran dan Pembelajaran di Rumah, was implemented nationwide as it supports non-contact policy in conveying educational materials. So the idea of remote teaching coincides with the Sustainable Development Goal 4, or also known as SDG 4, which was established by United Nations as a goal for the educational system. It aspires to provide non-discriminatory access and equal opportunities to education for all. However, Hodge et al. 2020 stated that the main objective of remote teaching is in the time of crisis is not to establish nor sustain a stable educational environment, yet rather to allow impermanent access to immediate education that is practical during an emergency. In fact, the present remote teaching only benefits students who possess internet connectivity at home, whereas the less fortunate students will still have to rely on paper and pencil as the primary mode of learning. This is stated by Quezada et al. 2020. One of the challenges that was apparent since the start of PDPR was that the majority of teachers are still not properly equipped with sufficient instruments to embrace the sudden change in normal practices in the educational system, thus inhibiting a smooth transition into the modern education system envisioned by the government. Unfortunately, there are limited number of recorded resources that can be linked directly to the teacher's readiness in conducting English as a second language (ESL) remote teaching, specifically in Malaysia during the COVID-19 pandemic. So as a result of the aforementioned arguments, the study was conducted to investigate the teacher's readiness in conducting ESL remote teaching in Malaysia during the COVID-19 pandemic. Then, we arrive at the deduction for the research objective and research question of the study. So for the research objective, we decided that we would like to investigate the teachers' readiness in conducting ESL remote teaching in Malaysia during the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, the research question of this study is, to what extent are the teachers ready to conduct ESL remote teaching in Malaysia during the COVID-19 pandemic?
My name is Mastura Aimuni binti Muhammad Zain. I am the third author and I will explain on the literature review. Many studies had indicated the need for countries to improve their educational readiness in emergency cases such as the pandemic. Regardless of the fact that teaching and learning did not come to a halt, the COVID-19 outbreak severely impacted teaching and learning processes at all educational levels. This is supported by UNESCO 2020, where they had recorded that multiple levels of schooling in 165 countries had conducted teaching and learning practices from home. Hence, to provide students with a consistent learning environment, teachers should be prepared for the transition from teaching in the physical classroom to remote teaching, which is according to Deal et al. 2020. They had expected the remote teaching would be the primary mode of delivering education, especially during the pandemic. Within the context of this study, the readiness among teachers to conduct English as second language (ESL) remote teaching can be influenced by several aspects, particularly in their knowledge, skills, and affective domain. Firstly, the knowledge to conduct ESL remote teaching is a vital factor to be mastered by teachers during these hard times in order to sustain learning continuity among learners. According to Hodges et al. 2020, a lot of teachers were struggling to figure out how to switch their pedagogy to emergency remote teaching. This is because the role of the instructor when teaching through online platforms differs from teaching in the traditional classroom. Moving on to the skills readiness among teachers, they must have the ability to choose, handle, use, and create educational resources that are in line with the growth of multimedia content. According to Northcote et al. 2015, teachers must be competent to produce teaching resources that best suit the learner's needs during remote teaching. Lastly, the dynamic of the learning environment due to the COVID-19 pandemic had caused the ups and downs in teachers' effective. Hence, it is vital for teachers to keep their affectionate disposition stable during the remote teaching period. Motivation is essential for teachers during remote teaching because the complexity of instruction requires teachers to quickly overcome problems in distance and virtual classroom. A stable, effective disposition among teachers will facilitate the process of adaptation and indirectly improve teachers' sense of competence, which is related to the notion of self-efficacy by Bandura 1997.
We utilize a survey designed to conduct our research. We used convenient sampling method to select 36 teachers from 3 different districts in Larut Matang and Selamat Perak, Kuala Lipis Pahang, and Lahadatu Sabah. The research instrument used was a set of questionnaire adapted from the TPAC framework and Galina's 2019 study. We use a descriptive statistics in percentages to analyze our collected data. So these are the findings for our research. Based on the data, 78% of our respondents were females, whereas 22% were males. A majority of our respondents have 1 to 5 years of teaching experience. This shows that most of the teachers were fresh and new to the education profession. As you can see, only 11% have 11 to 20 years of teaching experience and 8% were considered senior teachers. Next, 58% of our respondents were ethnically Malay, followed by 25% Chinese, 11% Indians, and 6% of other races such as Kadazan and Rungus. According to the result analysis in terms of teachers' readiness, the items whereby teachers know a lot about different online applications for remote teaching, such as Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and Google Meet, received the highest percentage of agreement. As you can see, the highest percentages circled in black amounted to 86.1% of agreement. This shows that majority of teachers recognize the online applications at face value. On the other hand, only 52.8% of teachers knew how to use various courseware programs to deliver instructions remotely. This shows that only a least amount of teachers were able to manipulate online application interface thoroughly, using application tools such as Jamboard and Blackboard. As for the teacher skills readiness, the highest percentage of teachers, which is 88.9%, agreed that they were able to choose and adapt online applications that enhance the teaching approaches for remote teaching. This indicated that many of the teachers were able to adapt online applications that were suitable for their student learning needs. However, the least number of teachers, with the percentages of only 50%, agreed that they have the ability to meet all the demands for remote teaching. So, not all the teachers were able to create conducive environment for teaching, such as making sure that all the students were present online, keeping them engaged, or being equipped with infrastructure to teach and free from technical difficulties. Last but not least, in terms of teachers' effective readiness, majority of the teachers, which is 91.7%, were ready to receive feedback from parents on their remote teaching. This meant that teachers regarded parents' participation in their students' learning as not a source of stress, but a source of encouragement and for improvement in teaching. Nonetheless, only 38.9% of teachers experience positive emotions such as satisfaction, interest, amusement, and contentment when they were dealing with remote teaching. Teachers might feel that remote teaching is a form of responsibility and their motivation towards it is more of professional commitment instead of personal interest or satisfaction.
Now, I will continue with the discussion section. In terms of knowledge, we found out that majority of the research volunteers possess sufficient knowledge in conducting remote teaching on their own, because most of the respondents managed to equip themselves with the necessary insights on remote teaching to allow efficient transition from classroom teaching into remote teaching in such a short time. The same finding was discovered by Van Tian 2018 through his research in a different country, whereby there was also a group of teachers who managed to cope with remote teaching patterns despite their limited experience. Surprisingly, there is an indication that there is an insufficient emphasis and efforts that have been put forth in preparing teachers to confront remote teaching policy from an institutional perspective despite the high expectation that was demanded from them. In terms of skills, we found out that integration of teaching experience with technical knowledge of remote teaching in teaching strategy could actually elevate the students' performance through production of high-quality learning materials, which is in accordance to the statement by Northcote et al. 2015, who stated that online teaching skills are described as variations in self-confidence in carrying out tasks such as choosing correct technical tools, conducting virtual interactions, facilitating material, ensuring and also maintaining course structure. So these skills would aid in the production of materials that are tailored to the needs of the learners. However, it is unfortunate that only half of the respondents were confident enough of their ability to fulfill the requirement of remote teaching, though most of them were actually skillful enough to implement it. This might be to the difference in perceptions among respondents regarding the expectation of the skills that should be possessed by a teacher. In terms of effective, most respondents are emotionally ready to implement remote teaching on a full-scale basis and are willing to accept constructive feedback from all parties. This is in line with the findings of Fedina et al. 2017, where the majority of teachers were found motivated despite having limitations. On top of that, majority of respondents agreed to commit to constantly improving their skills in remote teaching in order to cater to the needs of the learners, besides being able to develop their growth as educators professionally. Unfortunately, a significant number of respondents were negatively affected emotionally. This issue might be due to the extra burden imposed on them when they have to create a separate yet redundant online teaching materials, although they already have an abundance of readily available physical materials at schools. Next, for the recommendation and the limitation, as with all research, we were bounded by several factors that have imposed limitations on our research. So the two most significant limitations in our research are the small sample size and the skewed distribution of the research sample, which is bound to produce a biased outcomes. As can be seen from the personal traits of respondents, the majority of them are considerably young in their career, which would signify that most of them were already tech savvy since the start of their journeys as teachers. Hence, for future reference, it would be only fair to include teachers of diverse teaching backgrounds considering their environments, experiences, ages, and most definitely their technical knowledge in research for the benefit of a more outlook on the topic of interest.
Now I will explain the conclusion. Based on the findings of this study, the majority of teachers are well prepared and have the capabilities to perform remote teaching. They are ecstatic to be able to effectively use, conduct, and manage their technology abilities while teaching remotely. Furthermore, they are discovered to be capable of adapting to a number of teaching approaches and strategies that improve teaching efficacy when teaching remotely. Along with their knowledge and skills, the teachers are highly motivated and rationally prepared in conducting remote teaching, despite the fact that a few seem discontented with their own abilities and talents. The information obtained from this study is crucial, and it is intended that the findings will aid teachers, students, parents, and stakeholders in gaining a better understanding of Malaysian educators' readiness for remote teaching. That's all from us. Thank you.